My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
My very welcome guest today is coming to us from the great county of Cork and even the great city of Cork. It's Will Kennedy. So, Will, welcome to LGBTQ Life.
Thanks, Mick. Morning.
Yeah.
Will,
I'm going to start with if we could just go back into the mists of time. You and I are roughly speaking of the same generation, so we're 50s, 60s, that sort of thing. Your early life was in the military. What was it like to be in the military as an LGBT man in those days? Now, I suspect, in fact, I know you weren't the only one, but was it something that needed to be discreet, or was it something that needed to be hidden?
Oh, yeah, definitely hidden. And how I came to be in the army is a kind of an interesting story, too, because I was born in the 57, so everything was illegal and criminalized and everything. So before the army, I actually spent 4 years studying to be a priest. I was taking every route that you could take to get away from my sexuality. I really thought, like, I get cured in the priesthood. I join all the men in the army. Whoops. I don't know, masculine or something. Like, I don't know what it was. It was just a horrible time, like, you know. So after I left the priesthood, because I left before I got ordained. I left due to...
Did you go to Clonliffe College as a matter of interest, or where did you go?
Yeah, I was in Dublin, out in Dundrum. They're called the Palatine Fathers.
Yep.
And I went to Maynooth to do philosophy, but in my fourth year, when I would have gone on down to St. Pat's, our mother house was in Thurles alongside St. Pat's, to do theology. By then I had grown very disillusioned with the church, like, and my religion, and because of LGBT rights, so I left. But as a very, very mixed up young man, when I left it, I had no idea what to do with my future now, like, because that was kind of life I had planned. So my father was in the military, my brother was in the military, and one of my other passions is chefing. And my brother said to me, look, the army now are training chefs. They'll send you to college and everything. You don't really have to do you do the military stuff, but then you can train to be a chef. So I did that. I joined up, did my basic training with all the lads and everything. And you ask what it was like to be LGBT. I'll always remember it was the year that the Pogue song came out, was the year I joined, 80 something. I can't remember the exact year. And that was that line in that song, you scumbag, you maggot, you cheap loading faggot.
Yeah.
And I was in a room full of 26 other lads where we were in recruit training, and there was another crowd. Unfortunately, the recruit sergeant knew me before I joined the army, and I'd heard him say to them one night, I was coming out of the showers and landed, be careful of that guy there, he'd stick a tail in you.
Oh, for God's sake, what could you say?
And then there was that song, and I swear it was such a desperate time. Like, and I always felt, I don't know if it was me, but I always felt that in recruit training, I had to do everything twice as much as any of the lads.
Yeah, to be twice
I remember being forced into there was this big, we were crawling out on tactics, for people who don't know, along the ground, your rifle on the ground in front of you, and there was this big, huge pool, and everybody was crawling around it, and I was shouting at Kennedy, get into it. Of course, when I got into it, it was up to here. Everything seemed to be pushed at me, like, to do it harder, and maybe I took it on myself as well. I wanted to show that I could do it. You know, I was capable of proving my masculinity, ridiculous shit at that time. Like, but as time went on, then I only did very brief military thing, because I think I was 2 weeks stationed out in Ballincollig here in Cork when I went to Dublin to do my chef training, which took 3 years. And then I was back and in the kitchen, and yeah, I literally was an alcoholic, actually, at the time, functioning alcoholic. I'm sober 26 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and the more you drank in the army and the harder you were, the better you were. You were one of the lads. That was the atmosphere at the time, not now. But back then, so I took to drinking, doing all the laddie things. When we used to go, God, this is how I used to pretend so much. When we used to go to what's the name of the place? Glenabemal, up there in Wicklow.
Yeah,
it wasn't far from Dublin, so I would travel into Dublin to do little LGBT things, meet other gay men and stuff. And I'd get back late at night, and it was always about the girl I had met or what I did with her or anything, you know. It was totally hidden. You couldn't mention it. You literally couldn't. It led to such a one very funny incident. We were on the side of a mountain in Glenavermel, a little shebeen of a pub, and this bloke, really good-looking guy, and a woman came in, and we were all the soldier lads hanging around. And I ended up going away with the two of them, but it was him I was with. And in the morning when I got back to the camp, I was telling all the lads, "Oh my God, they're all one woman walks in and you put." That's the fun side, but in my head, I was in bits. I literally was completely in bits. There was no one to talk to, no one to.
What did you not say? I mean, we talk about a gaydar. Did you not identify, or shall we say, see other people who you think, no, yes, we or was it that well concealed?
I think it was that well concealed. I really think it was, because right up to it became legal in '93 and then in '99 in the army, and everybody knew I was gay. It was a bit like the American one because I just am. Yeah, I'm a bit flamboyant when I start get going and stuff. And there's a case of
a flamboyant ginger will.
But that kind of thing of don't ask, don't tell. So, and then there was me as well being very deceiving, like, you know, letting nobody know. And then in '93, I think it was '94, I got sober and I joined the Gay Project in Cork. So I started being a bit more comfortable in my sexuality and dealing with things, and then started telling people. And then in '99, when we became legal, I was out completely in the army until I left in 2012.
Congratulations.
I was a very visible out gay man for 2008 say to 2012, over 12 years. My last 12 years I was very visible. I actually was known as the gay chef.
but tell me, it's one thing to be in the military. As you pointed out, you were in a military family. How did that manifest itself? Was there tension there over that, or again, did they say, "This is our son, to hell with it"?
Well, my parents were of a generation. My dad was born in 1919, my mother 1923 or something. That forget homosexuality. They didn't talk about sex or any kind of thing, like, you know, that was a no-no area. So I ever actually said to my parents I'm gay, but they knew, and I knew. It was that unspoken thing that we don't talk about it. They're far too uncomfortable to talk about it. But my dad was really proud when I started going overseas. He never knew how to connect with me on an emotional level because I was different to my four brothers. I was always an emotional kid. I always wanted to be told I loved. I expressed my emotions. My father was very caged in. He was born an illegitimate kid in Ireland in 1919, so he had a horrible upbringing. Couldn't express his emotions in any way, shape, or form. So we had a horrendous relationship for years. Slap down fights sometimes, like, you know, nothing to do with my sexuality. We just couldn't get on. And then when I started going overseas in the army, oh my God, he was utterly proud. When I'd come back from a trip in the Leb, Eritrea and Africa, any of those places, he was delighted. Like, it was all, but he could show it that way. You know, he could express his, if you'd like, but we didn't talk about my sexuality. Like my mother did. That was almost a bit of a sick relationship because I have one sister. Me and my mother would go shopping for clothes to my mother. We would do everything together, myself and my mother. It was like, and yet that stupid Irish thing for appearance, we never discussed my sexuality.
Look, I don't think, to be perfectly honest, Will, at the time, I don't think most people who are heterosexual discuss their sexuality with their parents who are of our generation. They just did not want to know. So I think that's one of the issues. But can I come back to you then? I mean, the military was one thing. You're also in Cork. Now, as far as I am aware, Cork produced one of the great LGBT icons of Ireland, which is Danny LaRue. I mean, what was it like to be LGBT in Cork at that time? I know you moved around a lot, but
one thing about Cork, when I was even younger, ever before 14 years of age, I discovered a little I don't know if you've ever heard of it when people talk about gay history in Cork. A place on McCurtain Street was called Number 4.
I've heard of it, yes, yes.
Tiny little club. I remember the first night I found it, flagon of cider down my neck, rang the bell outside the door, walked in, and there was about 6 to 8 people standing there. It was my first time seeing 2 guys on a dance floor together.
Yeah.
Then I saw 2 guys kissing, and I was a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't have been in there. Like,
shouldn't have been there.
And it was like, it blew my head. It was like, oh my God, there are people like me. And then from there, because it was they couldn't serve drink or anything, like it was very restricted as to what we could do. Cops raided it quite often. When I was young, it lasted a few years, but we used to have such a fun time. And I can say this, like you're asking about the history. From the club, you'd meet a certain amount of people. Then we would go cruising together on Saturday night when the club opened, around the corner on the docks. Then we'd be cruising in certain areas in Cork. Then we'd have parties in each other's houses. So there was a thriving kind of underground.
It's interesting because before we came on the air, I was just thinking to myself, when you and I were growing up, it was generally referred to as the gay scene, and to a large extent, that's what it was. It was a scene. It was an energy. It was a whole, if you like, aesthetic. Now we talk about the LGBT community, which I agree, it has evolved, and I think that's a very powerful thing. I know we miss our youth, but do you miss those times?
Yeah. It was horrible that we had to do it, to be underground and hiding and everything.
Yeah.
But it produced a kind of sense of, when they talk about community now, it produced a great bond, great friendships. It also had very sad parts in it, like, because you'd with a guy the night before you met.
Yeah.
I don't know, cruising, go back to his place. Then you'd bump into him in town, and you mightn't even say hello to each other.
Yeah.
There was this fear of being recognized. So there was a good and a bad side to it. But I do miss the bit of fun. I remember getting to know a complete community in one cruising area. Yeah. And we'd all just sit down, we'd be fed up, I don't know, after having sex with each other loads of times. And somebody new would walk along, and there'd be so much fun about, oh, will you, will I? There was real humor and real kind of thing. And then I suppose I was never, ever, ever happy with my sexuality. I was molested when I was 12, and my introduction to my sexuality was so dark. It was all he was telling me it was all my fault. I was the little faggot, and I was making him do these things. And I took on board, if you were ever, I think children who are molested, you take on everything they're saying, and it is your fault. So I developed the belief that my sexuality was a horrible thing, like, you know,
sinful even, because we grew up.
Oh God, simple. Yeah. I went to confession about it and was told I was simple. Bad mistake. But strangely enough, I had this weird thought. That's where the religion came in, because my parents never pushed religion on me, that I would somehow enter the priesthood, get the gift of chastity. Big mistake. And be cured. But for my early years, that community was great. It really was. It was such fun. Then in the 80s, I went into the seminary that I was in. So I kind of missed from, say, 81 to about 88, when HIV started and was, 82 in Ireland was the first case. But I knew all about it, heard all about it and everything. But my time for those first few years, I wouldn't have been a real activist until I got sober.
Sure.
But it's the one thing I'm looking back now, when you ask me that question, do I miss it? The one thing I do miss, and I sometimes young gay men and stuff, our LGBT people, get me wrong when I talk now. Like, when the gay marriage referendum came out, for instance, I voted yes. I've been a witness for friends at their marriage, utterly happily, for choice. I want choice and equality, but I didn't want marriage. And I tried to explain at the time, I didn't want marriage, gay, straight, any marriage. I don't believe in the institution, because I felt that before AIDS struck, what we were looking for was totally different. AIDS changed what LGBT people were looking for. We were looking for not assimilation. We were looking to be accepted on our terms.
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
that's like that.
Yeah. when did you become conscious of that, Will? Because I was in Australia in about 80. Well, I was there from about 1980, but I became conscious of HIV/AIDS in about 82. And it was devastating because at that stage, the LGBT, what I call LGBT culture, was just on the rise. It was almost like this was somebody had let off a bomb, and it suddenly put a full stop on what had been really a burgeoning culture. And that went on for 6 or 7 years. But when did you become conscious of there was something really dangerous and devastating happening to our community as a result of this virus?
Oh, I think even though I was in the seminary in 84, I was very aware because I was reading what was happening in the States mainly at the time, because there was, more happening in New York and San Francisco and everywhere.
Absolutely.
And what really hurt was like the bloody newspaper ads and stuff that I was reading, both here and there, like the gay plague, gay devastating, lock them up, put them away, It's up to that, as you were saying, we were just beginning. Maybe there was a glimmer of hope that, we were going to be legalized, things would happen. And then this came along and it just gave the right-wing fundamentalists every opportunity to point the finger at this community and say, like, the horrible thing was there was the innocent HIVers and the guilty. Yeah. If you got it like from blood, hemophilia, somehow you were an innocent victim. But it was portrayed as we were somehow, it was our own fault, let them die. I mean, it took from 82 for 87 for Reagan to mention the word AIDS in any speech. Yeah. And here in Ireland, it was 87 before the government got involved. You had all those other organizations working.
Well, to give you an example, Will, I came back here. I hadn't been here for about 15 years. I came back here in 1992. My father had a heart attack. He was up in Beaumont, which is where the main HIV treatment was. At that point in time, the HIV patients, they were about as far away from the main hospital as possible. And then as was the case, when they passed away, they were brought out in body bags. Now, I was just devastated because they had, for all the problems in Australia, they had taken a much more enlightened attitude to it. But did that, shall we say, go through the community like a bushfire where you were?
What was the saddest part of it? We knew people were dying, and I knew people who died, particularly when I came back out of the seminary and back to Cork full time. People were gone. Yeah. But the saddest part about it was there was no mention. Everybody was ashamed. Families were ashamed because they, you couldn't say my son or daughter died of AIDS. Well, not daughter so much, it was gay men then, had died of AIDS. So everybody was ashamed. There was almost this cone of silence. Yeah. Around the whole thing. Like, as you said, when people even died, funerals. I mean, funeral homes here in Cork, refused to handle the bodies, of HIV patients, of people who had died. Like, so a funeral could be arranged late in the evening, last funeral in the funeral home. It was horrible. I remember, biggest guy I remember who was public that died of it was Vincent Hanley. And there was if you remember the broadcaster.
Yes. Yeah.
And when he came back to Ireland, still people didn't realize he had died of AIDS.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Came back to New York.
Yeah. Well, this is why I was. We talk about COVID and the Rock Hudson moment. I mean, it really hit home to people in Australia when Rock Hudson passed away, and then when Liberace passed away. We knew then that this was something that you really have to take seriously. But I just want to come back to something that's a little more recent, Will, and I'd love to hear your view on it. And it's the TV program It's a Sin. Did you watch it?
Oh yeah, I had to, because I was asked to do 2 radio interviews here in Cork, and then a newspaper report for our evening paper. Yeah. So
Did it bring back memories? Did it bring back memories?
Yeah, I was asked to. Could I stream it? Because somebody wanted to do something in the paper fairly quick. And I watched one episode, got in touch with them and said, sorry, I can only watch this in my own time. Yeah, I cannot stream it. I said, it's far too upsetting.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It just, because it really portrayed, particularly when the first victim, say, was in the hospital ward and is dying on his own, they're pushing the food in under the door.
Wasn't that horrible? Wasn't
This
it?
happened. You
Oh,
know, this wasn't a drama.
yeah.
This actually happened. Here
Yeah.
in Ireland, it happened.
Yeah.
There was people in their homes in Cork, only for Cork AIDS Alliance at the time, and a couple of other organisations, Dublin AIDS Alliance, they were all called Alliance at the time,
Yeah.
going to their homes with food parcels, care parcels. People were dying like of
Yeah.
total neglect.
Yeah.
And that programme, I cried bitter tears. But one great thing came
Yeah.
out of it. I'm living back with my sister moved back with me a few years ago, and her son is in Canada. Actually, we're waiting to hear the birth of their baby today. His girlfriend's been induced today. But they know I'm gay. God almighty, my nephew knows it great. He really knows all about my activism and ACT UP and everything. But we never discussed my actual life. So I said to Rob in Canada and his girlfriend Alison, could you watch this? It's a sin. So they watched it and they streamed it. And something I thought would never happen growing up as a young man, myself, my sister, my nephew, and his girlfriend sat down and we discussed my life.
Yeah. Oh, that's
openly,
brilliant.
like I was
brilliant.
like, if you had told me that as a young guy that this would happen.
Yeah.
Alison was in floods, his Canadian girlfriend, because Canadians are so kind. I was like, how could people do that?
Well, look, I think we share some emotion on that one, because when I went through my phone about 2 days ago, and I think I must have sent out about 50 WhatsApp messages saying, please watch this. This is just so important. Not for your and my generation, because it brought back memories, but for people who weren't there to understand this happened and it could happen again. So, but this is why I want to come on to something a bit more up to date, Will. It's only, I think, 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, I was at Dublin Pride, and there was a brilliant man from Brazil, and he was one of those very macho guys, and he was talking about PrEP, and I had, excuse me, I had never heard of PrEP at that stage, even though I like to think I'm well informed. So I looked into it and I spoke to the guys from ACT UP Dublin, and then I discovered I have a friend who's in ACT UP in Dublin. You're involved with ACT UP, I gather, in Cork. How important do you think PrEP is, and how important do you think not only do the community know about it, but the politicians, the medical services, etc.?
I think it's vitally important because anything that can help to prevent new cases, anything like should be promoted and used. And PrEP, I have mixed opinions, if you like. I think it's brilliant that PrEP is there. I think it's absolutely fantastic that people can now take it, because I've had arguments with people, oh, you're advocating to go back now to condomless sex and everything. And I'm saying, I advocate PrEP to prevent HIV, not any other STIs you have to take care of yourself. So my thing about PrEP is, unfortunately, when the news about PrEP really broke, there was another great news for the HIV community, U equals U, untransmittable, undetectable. Exactly. Undetectable, untransmittable. And that's been overshadowed by PrEP, because undetectable, untransmittable simply means that if everybody got diagnosed, everybody was on meds, everybody who needs to was on meds, and then becomes undetectable, it's called treatment as prevention. If everybody was being treated, there would be no new cases happening. So U equals U and testing. They're the three things I push. That if you regularly test it, if you want PrEP, yes, use it. Everybody knows their own circumstances. The great thing about U equals U, I have friends who are gay couples who I know, one is negative, one is positive. There's two couples I'm thinking of. And they don't use PrEP because no positive partner can't pass it on. So they don't bother using PrEP. The married couple in our support group here in Cork, we have a group in Cork, Positive Cork, just for HIV people, not ACT UP. Somebody just recently had a baby through natural means. No need for, artificial insemination, no nothing. You can just get pregnant now. So I think PrEP has its use in the case of people, say, who want to, and good for them, have a good sex life. They're out there having sex and stuff. Take PrEP if you're having casual sex. Makes real sense to me, in that case, because
Sure, but again, and I think you've mentioned something that I'm always very much advocating to people. Um, what we call protection is protection, and it's not just protection against one thing; it's protection against another. And the chances are these days you're much more likely to catch syphilis, or you're much more likely. So, dare I say it, wear a raincoat. Yeah.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot of different ranges, like, but if people want to have the type of sex, what I'm saying is that these means now they can have the type of sex they want safely if they want to, like, but
Yeah.
I always advocate PrEP only deals with HIV. If you want to prevent yourself getting any of the others, you need to take all the precautions we always were taking.
Yeah.
It's not an advocacy to go mad.
Can I come back to you then, and just on this one, Will? How important then? You're out there on a Friday, Saturday night. Out there having a good time. You're 20 to 30 years of age. How important do you think the communication is, or do you think people should say, "Oh well, I'm not going to tell them that I'm HIV, that I've got on PrEP," or do you think people, have we reached that level of maturity that we now should have the confidence to say to somebody, "Hey, this is who I am"?
Well, from younger people,
Yeah.
I don't know really much about the social scene because I don't go clubbing and stuff anymore. But on Grindr, a lot of young men now actually say negative on PrEP. They actually say that if they're hooking up. I just would like it to become a time, maybe in Ireland, where you can actually just have that conversation, like when you're out.
Yeah.
I used, when I was, as for telling people about HIV, when I was diagnosed first, I tell any new partner I met my status.
Yeah.
But since U equals U, I don't feel overly concerned because I can't give them HIV.
Absolutely.
So it's like if I had any other illness, I don't need to tell a guy. That has taken away that. It used to be I had to protect you from me. Now, actually, I feel I'm protecting myself from the guy I'm meeting, so I don't have to tell them. But I believe we haven't really got there yet, because there's a lot of PrEP shaming goes on when people say it. It's a bit like, say, I don't know, trying to think of when the pill came out first. Oh, now all young women will go mad and be having sex and getting pregnant. It's a bit like that with PrEP. Oh, this is a license. So there's PrEP shaming. But when you think of it, it saves, if you're going to look at just in monetary terms, the amount it will save on new people, what they have to pay, like for medication, that the governments and stuff pay. It's a no-win situation to me. But have we reached that stage yet, Mick, in Ireland, where we can even be open and frank about sex?
Well, my view, Will, is that when I look at the people that we lost, this was almost like the LGBTQ holocaust. We lost a generation of enormous creative and intellectual talent that is just not replaceable. And that's the way I tend to see it, is if we can make even the smallest inroads into that, then we've done something useful.
Because the harder thing to hear now is, I know of people recently, because they come to us through the support group. It's actually shameful to hear young gay men, and you might know Robbie Lawler from
I do.
Robbie didn't know what HIV was. And I've met two other guys recently who were diagnosed, a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old. Never heard of it. First time having sex, went out and got HIV. Because they never even knew it was around. It was when their doctors, when they were being treated, told them. It's like, so there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a hell of a lot of work, because here's somebody starting out in life at 17, gets HIV. Yes, now you can live a long life. That's fine, and take the meds. But there's lots of other complications. The stigma and the discrimination that goes with it still.
At the risk of being a bit controversial, Will, I think there is going to be an epidemic of hepatitis C because of the widespread use of cocaine and people sharing notes and all of that sort of thing. So who knows? Let's hope that we can learn from the past. I just want to finish off on one thing, because I know you're involved with as a volunteer with the sexual health services down there. A lot of talk is about physical health, particularly men's physical health, but it's mental health, particularly for older LGBT men, and particularly during the COVID lockdown. How do you think people are, particularly people of our generation, how do you think they're coping?
To be
Because
honest,
a lot would be isolated. A lot wouldn't have been out to their families. They wouldn't have that support network that a younger group might have.
To be honest with you, I think that's the problem. That's why I'm getting involved now, only recently, in older LGBT support, because I've just found out, well, not found out, just what was always known, as you've just said, that like if you're living in rural areas, isolated areas, older LGBT people now have fears like going into, say, a nursing home or a care home, even having carers in your house, like, as you get older and get ill. These are things that they have to start beginning to think about now.
Absolutely.
Somebody said recently in some discussion I was having that they were talking to, some survey was done and older LGBTs were asked to name their next of kin and they couldn't because they were on their own completely, like, and I felt that was sad, that like they didn't want people to know. So I think Peter Street offers counselling service. It begins like if you're diagnosed with HIV, because that's their service, but it then leads into more like I talk to my counsellor every week still, and we never discuss my HIV now, like, and everything. So I'm lucky, but there is moves happening. On the 20th of May, I don't know if you've heard of the Beautana Festival.
I have, yes.
Yeah. So on the 20th of May, myself, an American friend of mine, actually, he's living in Youghal here in Cork, Dahi, and Aetha, I forget Aetha's second name, we're having a discussion, and it's been hosted by Rory, Miss Canty, but he'll be Rory O'Neill on the day.
He'll be Rory on the day, as we say.
And it's focused on exactly what you were asking me there now, older LGBT needs, what it's like. It's actually called intersectional identities. So like discussing your sexual identity, your older identity, your class, your religion. So because I feel if we focus, like has been needed, like, on our sexual identity so much, we lose out on the other things that are going on. Because I'm not just a sexual, a gay man. I'm working class, I'm white, I'm I have all these things.
You're a chef.
I'm a chef, I'm a soldier. I got a degree at 60. I actually got my degree at 60.
Congratulations, mate. Mazel tov.
In UCC in Cork. And I think, like, for me, I'm lucky. Even with HIV and I've had cancer, I'm very healthy. But for my friend now, actually, who'll be on that talk, he's got a lot of health issues and everything, and he's fighting hard for older LGBTs, because I think it is a very, very, not just neglected because they're not known. They're neglected because they're not visible. And I think, like any section of the community, like people with HIV, I want us to be much more visible, because if you're not seen, you're not heard. But it's very hard for somebody, say, in their 70s now or something, who's never spoken about their sexual identity. Imagine trying to start talking about it now. Unfortunately, like, to family or friends. And I get it, like, because I know men of my generation, not living too far from me here in Cork City, who are married. I've met them out at places and everything, like, and they never ever told anyone. Well, what could a guy that age do? Like, say if his wife died now or something, like, there's a lot needs to be discussed, teased out, support. Like, I'm delighted with Haley's initiative, the Seeding the County. There's a lot of good going on there, like, from that little group in Youghal. Because I think we need to interconnect, like yourself now from Dublin, I'm in Cork. We can link up all the different counties, like, like I did my training for my HIV, I do peer support when it's going to be up and running. I'm so connected. I did my training in Belfast, paid for by a British HIV charity, and finished off my training in London because there was funding here in Cork for it.
Well, unfortunately, we are going to have to finish today, but I have every confidence I'm going to come back to you, because I knew you would be a fascinating speaker, and you certainly have not disappointed, and you're a phenomenal tribute to the great city of Cork. So, Will, it has been a total delight talking to you today. Keep up the good work. You've laid down a great legacy, and let's maintain it. So, Will Kennedy, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you today. Stay safe, stay fabulous.
You too, Mick, and thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. Take care.
My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.